As cellarer of the monastery, there should be chosen from the community someone who is wise, mature in conduct, temperate, not an excessive eater, not proud, excitable, offensive, dilatory, or wasteful, but God-fearing and like a parent to the whole community. The cellarer will take care of everything, but will do nothing without an order from the prioress or abbot. Let the cellarer keep to those orders. The cellarer should not annoy the members. If anyone happens to make an unreasonable demand, the cellarer should not reject that person with disdain and cause distress, but reasonably and humbly deny the improper request. Let cellarers keep watch over their own souls, ever mindful of that saying of the apostle, "They who serve well secure a good standing for themselves." The cellarer must show every care and concern for the sick, young, guests, and the poor, knowing for certain that they will be held accountable for all of them on the day of judgment. The cellarer will regard all utensils and goods of the monastery as sacred vessels of the altar, aware that nothing is to be neglected. Cellarers should not be prone to greed, not be wasteful and extravagant with the goods of the monastery, but should do everything with moderation and according to the order of the prioress or abbot. The cellarer of the monastery is simply someone who keeps up with the goods. The goods of the monastery primarily are those things needed for food, sustenance, and all of the necessary things that people need. The word cellarer, by the way, is the reference to the cellar, which was a common place in which foods would be kept, things would be dried, things would be preserved, and taken out for necessary usage. And in the case of the person who serves as cellarer, we see the manifestations of all of the Benedictine virtues that have been named throughout the first part of the rule. The cellarer is someone who takes care of the needs of the community in its temporal needs. Everyone needs food, everyone needs clothes, everyone needs a tidy place in order to call their home. And in that way, they are a parent to the community in at least the sense of taking care of their physical needs. And Benedict outlines some very important and practical things for the cellarer. They should not be someone who is wasteful. Sister Joan put a very wonderful comment at the end of this chapter and said that Benedictine spirituality and practice is not wasteful, is not given over to planned obsolescence. There are no throwaway things, and neither are there any throwaway people that come to the monastery. The cellarer has to be a servant of all. And they also have to be wise in the ways in which they distribute the goods. They obviously are under direction of the prioress or abbot, but at the same time, they are the keeper of the important things for everyone. And they are to particularly, it's important to note which sins Benedict specifically names, but they are not to be given over to insatiable desires, gluttony, and neither are they to use their position to shortchange some of those who they don't like and bless or extravagantly give to those whom they do like. They are not to exercise their authority as someone who is simply a slave to their own whims and desires. They are to serve without difference, and they are to follow what they are told by the abbot or prioress, but to serve all in an equal and moderate manner. Above all, let the cellarer be humble. If goods are not available to meet a request, the cellarer will offer a kind word in reply, for it is written, "A kind word is better than the best gift." Cellarers should take care of all that the prioress or abbot entrusts to them, and not presume to do what they have forbidden. They will provide the members their allotted amount of food without any pride or delay, lest they be led astray. For cellarers must remember what the scripture says that person deserves who leads one of the little ones astray. If the community is rather large, the cellarer should be given helpers, so that with assistance it becomes possible to perform the duties of the office calmly. Necessary items are to be requested and given at the proper times, so that no one may be disquieted or distressed in the house of God. The The goods of the monastery, that is, its tools, clothing, or anything else, should be entrusted to members whom the prioress or abbot appoints and in whose manner of life they have confidence. The abbot or prioress will, as they see fit, issue to them the various articles to be cared for and collected after use. The prioress and abbot will maintain a list of these so that when the members succeed one another in their assigned tasks, they may be aware of what they hand out and what they receive back. Whoever fails to keep the things belonging to the monastery clean or treats them carelessly should be reproved. If they do not amend, let them be subject to the discipline of the rule. For those who might think about monastics as people who are standing above, beyond, and in some ways are escaping the mundaneness of life, those who are higher spiritual people who don't pay attention to the mundane things of the physical world, well, St. Benedict has a word for you, which is that the spirit is intimately connected with the physical world. There's no such thing as standing apart and beyond the physical world for St. Benedict. In fact, you could probably equate this to St. Benedict's seriousness on the incarnation of Christ. God, in all of the fullness of the divine, becomes human like us, puts on material things, and blesses material things, says that food is necessary, clothes are necessary. The Father knows you need these things, Jesus tells his disciples. Benedict is very plain with the people around the monastery that the spiritual things of life don't give you an excuse to shortchange good care for the physical items that we have for necessities. Houses have to be maintained in order to keep you out of the cold and out of the hot and out of the weather. You have to have clean swept floors so that you don't have accumulation of all kinds of food residue that attracts mice and all other types of rodents and creepy crawly things, so to speak. There is an aspect in which the physical world is in fact so deeply spiritual to Benedict that he has the fairly harsh injunction that if the house is not kept clean, those who are responsible will be subject to discipline. That it's important enough that if it's not being done, we've got to fix this, and we've got to fix it fast. So when we think about Benedict, and honestly, if we think about just Christian spirituality in general, we are not spiritualists that de-spiritualize the physical and only stand off and maybe above and snub our noses at the things that have to get done practically. In fact, practicality in the taking care of the physical nature of the world is, in fact, one of the important tasks that we have to take care of. And so, if we think about our own lives, we cannot simply shortchange the physical things of the world that are necessary and the spiritual things rather that we want to chase after, because that's a false dichotomy. Rather, the physical and spiritual are part of the same spiritual realm of the physical. And Benedict makes sure that we remember we cannot forget that. Above all, this evil practice of private ownership must be uprooted and removed from the monastery. We mean that without an order from the prioress or abbot, no members may presume to give, receive, or retain anything as their own, nothing at all, not a book, writing tablets, or stylus. In short, not a single item, especially since monastics may not have the free disposal even of their own bodies and wills. For their needs, they are to look to the prioress or abbot of the monastery and are not allowed anything which the prioress or abbot has not given or permitted. All things should be the common possession of all as it is written, so that no one presumes ownership of anything. But if any members are caught indulging in this most evil practice, they should be warned a first and second time. If they do not amend, let them be subject to punishment. The evil practice of private ownership. Ooh boy, that one is a spicy take by St. Benedict. And to perhaps a lot of us who hear this and don't reflect carefully on this, it is perhaps for us in our United States culture a significant charge, since private ownership, private property is enshrined within our own constitution of law. It's the part of the law of the land that there is such thing as private ownership. But we have to think about why. Why is it that St. Benedict says this evil of private ownership? Well, we have to do a little bit of thinking about the history of the monastic movement. So St. Benedict lives in the 500s, and this is during the incredible rise of the monastic movement that escapes to the desert of Egypt, when all of a sudden Christianity becomes legal in the Roman Empire and persecutions have ceased. Christians begin to look around and say, and the alarm bells start going off, because if they are not being persecuted for their faith, there's something that's gone wrong. Now, again, this might seem like something that doesn't make any sense to us, but it's important to recognize that the early church understood persecutions as a guarantee for taking up service and discipleship in Christ. Might be a helpful perspective for us to have when we think about private ownership. Because all of a sudden Christians are legal within the empire, they're no longer a persecuted minority, and all of a sudden there are affordings to the culture in which Christians are able to participate in, and all of a sudden there becomes the ability to be a Christian who is wealthy and owns a lot of stuff. Now, if we look at the Bible, we have a lot of people who own a lot of stuff and who are faithful people. Abraham being one of them, right? Abraham owned, he was one of the richest dudes in the entire Middle East. And the thing is that Benedict is not, and this is important to note, Benedict is not saying that having possessions of some sort are an evil. What he's saying very specifically is private ownership of things. Having things for myself that I can choose without delay and without consultation what I can do with them. And the reason why Benedict brings this up is because when the monastic movement really takes off, it was a forsaking of the whole concept and idea of being privileged in society. Instead, they forsook all of that to live in utter simplicity. And in the simplicity of that living, the focus of the spiritual disciplines for a lot of monastics was to take only the things that are completely necessary for my physical well-being, while instead focusing on the spiritual virtues that will outlast all of our attachments to earth. In a way, they were not enmeshing themselves in society in such a way that they were entangled by the passions of the world. And Benedict sees private ownership as a deeply problematic way that we can become entangled by various attachments to the way that the world works. Sister Joan actually points out a couple of them, such as not being able to move to a new place because your mortgage ties you down. Or more socially, we throw big parties to try to get promotions from some of our employers. We are reciprocal in the ways in which parties are given and are expected to be reciprocated. We've gathered at my house this time. Now you owe me coming over to your house for some reason. But there's all kinds of other things. Student loans, what about those? The things that all of our students who go through, myself included, that have to go through incredible amounts of student loan debt. Some pay it off, some have it for pretty much the rest of their professional career. And all of that is a burdening and tying down, whether it was from their own choices or not. It simply is the case that we are attached to many different things. And, importantly, we are attached to many different things that pull us apart from each other. We are attached and enmeshed in things that distract us or prevent us from taking care of another person. And especially in the United States, where individualism is simply the water where we live in, Benedict wants to safeguard us from developing into a community that simply is all about me and not recognizing that everyone needs necessities just as much as I do. To put it in the way that Sister Joan put it, whenever I discover that my life depends on other people, that my life depends on my neighbor. It's not that my neighbor is a nice accessory to my life that sometimes I say hi across my hedges to, but rather that my life depends on my neighbor. And likewise, that my neighbor depends on my life. All of a sudden, we have a different understanding of what possessions are necessary. Are we sharing of our possessions so that everyone who relies on us, whether we recognize it or not, is fed, clothed, and taken care of? Perhaps to put this in a way that it makes a little bit more sense, at least in my community, when we live in a rural part of the country, in rural Arkansas, do the people who have a lot understand that those who have little rely on those people for their health and their necessities? It is not the case that they are simply taken care of by a benevolent third party, whether that be government, whether that be other things in the social culture, but rather that there is a personal responsibility to use my physical necessities in order to take care of those who do not have access to them. Whenever we begin to think about that, we begin to see the contours of why Benedict is so against the idea of private ownership. And this is not something that we can simply take whole hog and say that private ownership equals what the 21st century understands as private ownership. What Benedict is saying very plainly is that when we begin to see our stuff as ours in total and no one else's, we've begun to lose the battle. Because the physical world is not ours to begin with. And in fact, we came into the physical world with nothing and we will leave it with nothing. Sound like a biblical passage? It's because it is one. Instead, we have to use correctly the things that we have been given. And in the monastery, that particular virtue of the Christian life is lived out by no monastic having anything to call their own except for the necessities that they actually need, because everything is held in common for the good of all and not for the mere private use of the individual. It is written, distribution was made as each had need. By this we do not simply imply that there should be favoritism, God forbid, but rather consideration for weakness. Whoever needs less should thank God and not be distressed, but those who need more should feel humble because of their weakness, not self-important because of the kindness shown to them. In this way, all the members will be at peace, first and foremost. There will be no word or sign of the evil or grumbling, no manifestation of it for any reason at all. If, however, anyone is caught grumbling, let them undergo more severe discipline. Even after acknowledging that everything is held in common and no one has any ownership over anything except for the distribution of what is necessary, Benedict follows up that with immediately saying, there are some that require more and some that require less. And that this should never be a place in which one either has has something given to them in which they feel like they should have more, or those who are given more should feel as if they are better esteemed in the community, but rather there is a level of trust in which the community simply takes what is given and trusts that their best interests are being served. There is a level in which the monastics are being asked this is not easy, but there's a level at which the monastics are being asked to trust that what they are given is what they need. And even though we might want more, we might want to have the larger portion than our neighbors, we instead are being told that the reason why they are given what they need in their particular portions as it comes to an individual's needs is not so that we can simply play favorites, but rather so that we may have trust that the things we are given are indeed the things that we need. And that insofar as we are tempted to think that we need more, we are asked into self-reflection. Do I actually need more, or do I simply want more? In a culture in the United States in which we are constantly begged to want things, perhaps it's helpful for us to enter into that period of self-reflection in which we ask ourselves, do we really need the things that we are told that we need? Or are these simply wants? Are these simply desires that are being stoked by the entertainment industry and all of the advertisements that are thrown at us? Do we really need the things that are being told to us that we need? There's a level of discernment in this. But even as it comes to the physical necessities, Benedict understands people really do need different things. And that's not an avenue for us to think highly of ourselves or think lowly of ourselves, but rather it is an avenue in which we can trust and learn to trust those who are taking care of us. The members should serve one another. Consequently, no members will be excused from kitchen service unless they are sick or engaged in some important business of the monastery, for such service increases reward and fosters love. Let those who are not strong have help so that they may serve without distress, and let everyone receive help as the size of the community or local conditions warrant. If the community is rather large, the cellarer should be excused from kitchen service, and as we have said, those should also be excused who are engaged in important business. Let all the rest serve one another in love. On Saturday, the ones who are completing the kitchen work will do the washing. They are to wash the towels which the members use to wipe their hands and feet. Both the one who is ending service and the one who is about to begin are to wash the feet of everyone. The utensils required for the kitchen service are to be washed and returned intact to the cellarer, who in turn issues them to the one beginning the next week. In this way, the cellarer will know what is handed out and what is received back. There is very little left to the imagination as to Benedict's understanding of serving one another. We often hear the verse quoted that they will know that you are Christians by your love. And in Christ's service to the apostles before the Last Supper, before the Holy Communion is instituted, he washes the disciples' feet. He says, as I have done to you, so you do to each other. And so we have this injunction to serve. But Benedict really does take that literally in that he follows up everyone should serve one another, not with some kind of esoterical, I am serving my neighbor by doing something non-physical, and says, therefore, no one is excused from kitchen duty. But there's a deeply spiritual thing going on here if we pay attention to it, which is that the shared meal, the shared table, remember in the chapters we talked about earlier a couple weeks ago when we talked about the shared part of the monastery and whenever someone is excommunicated from the common table, kitchen duty for Saint Benedict is one of the more important icons of what the Eucharistic meal means whenever you celebrate the Holy Eucharist. The whole point is that Christ gives his body and blood, gives his very self to us in service of us. And it's in the context of him washing the feet of the apostles. And the thing is that In that same sort of way, Benedict's understanding of the kitchen is the act of love for one another. And he says that the only excuses that anyone has really is the cellarer or those who are taking care of monastery business that are extraordinary. And in fact, he even says, not even the abbot or prioress is excused from this. They are also included in this. Everyone is to participate in kitchen duty because there is a level of attention, love, and care in preparing a meal, washing the items necessary, serving all in the community that is a necessary part of learning how to be a servant after Christ. The physical labor of the kitchen is in fact something that teaches the monks and the nuns how to live as Christ, which is helpful for us, I think, to think about. Physical service is an avenue for spiritual growth, and that this is not something that is optional either. This is something that has to get done for the good of the monastery, but most importantly, the monastery is the school of love. This is where you learn how to be like Christ. And if you are unwilling to serve in the kitchen duties, unwilling to prepare and help in service of others, that is something deficient in spirituality. Again, this is not an optional ministry for St. Benedict. This is an essential, necessary ministry in which you learn how to love each other in service. An hour before mealtime, the kitchen workers of the week should each receive a drink and some bread over and above the regular portion so that at mealtime they may serve one another without grumbling or hardship. On solemn days, however, they should wait until after the dismissal. On Sunday, immediately after lauds, those beginning, as well as those completing their week of service, should make a profound bow in the oratory before all and ask for their prayers. Let the server completing the week recite this verse, "Blessed are you, O God, who have helped me and comforted me." After this verse has been said 3 times, the server receives a blessing. Then the one beginning the service follows and says, "O God, come to my assistance. O God, make haste to help me." And all repeat this verse 3 times. When they have received a blessing, the servers begin their service. Practically, when Benedict is preparing the rotation of servers for the week, and servers in this case are kitchen workers, they are to understand that their duty requires them to do some physical labor above and beyond what others are receiving during the week. They should practically be given a meal in which they are able to have prior to the service of those whom they are serving, so that they can have full bellies, be well prepared, and are not simply feeling spiteful for having to go through all this work. It's helpful to understand, though, that during solemn days that he underlines, those are days of fasting in which all of the community are participating in some sort of fasting, even though there are going to be some level of food being given to everyone. But the practical aspect is that those who are going to be serving, those should eat so that they're able to serve in a joyful manner. But there's also a really wonderful thing about this, which is that, did you notice? The kitchen servers who served the previous week are called up in the middle of the prayer assembly at lauds and are then prayed for specifically. They are to bless the Lord who let them do the work that they had to do. And then the ones who are serving that week are called up to receive prayers and blessings of the community. In other words, not only are they brought into the center of the community as being worthy of recognize, but they also are intentionally locating their service as part of their worship and life in Christ. It's not that those who are called to be servers of meals are simply like, okay, they leave chapel early and are unable to participate in the rest of chapel, but they are actually recognized, prayed for by the community as they go to do their work. It's a recognition of those who are providing for the community by their service. But most importantly, it is a location of their work as being done in Christ, and therefore is worthy of being prayed for by name and understanding that this is a spiritual exercise that they have undertaken. Care of the sick must rank above and before all else, so that they may truly be served as Christ, who said, "I was sick and you visited me. And what you did for one of the least of my people, you did for me." Let the sick on their own part bear in mind that they are served out of honor for God, and let them not by their excessive demands distress anyone who serves them. Still, the sick must be patiently borne with, because serving them leads to a greater reward. Consequently, the prioress or abbot should be extremely careful that they suffer no neglect. Let a separate room be designated for the sick, and let them be served by an attendant who is God-fearing, attentive, and concerned. The sick may take baths whenever it is advisable, but the healthy, and especially the young, should receive permission less readily. Moreover, to regain their strength, the sick who are very weak may eat meat, but when their health improves, they should all abstain from meat as usual. The abbot and prioress must take the greatest care that cellars and those who serve the sick do not neglect him, for the shortcomings of disciples are their responsibility. Everyone gets sick. Everyone at some point in time in life is infirm, and everyone at some point in their life needs the care of others in order for them to be able to receive what they need. I would imagine that most people who are probably tuning in with us have, at least at one point or another, been sick to the point at which they could do nothing without help from someone. And in those particular cases of infirmity, thank goodness for those who had people to take care of them. For those of you who might have been in a situation of isolation, think about how isolating that was, about how there was no one to take care of you, and how Benedict specifically says not only are the sick to have their own place, such as not to make the community sick for one case, but are also to have someone specifically to attend them. It says that there should be an attendant to those who are sick, who are concerned, God-fearing, that they understand what they're doing is in fact serving Christ in the least of these. And Benedict brings up again the Matthew passage of, "You have served those who were sick. I was sick and you took care of me." This is not an option for the community. This is an aspect of spiritual growth, both for the one who's taking care of the sick and also for those who are sick. Again, the sick are not removed from the life of the community. In fact, they are made even more the center of the community, given extra care. And in fact, that one little line that says they may eat meat, and then after they get better, or if they are not too sick, they should abstain from meat. One of the things is that, number one, meat was really hard to find and really hard to come by. It was very expensive. But number two, red meat was, in the Roman culture, sometimes associated with sexual activity. Well, the whole point is that those who are in need of extra care will receive extra care, because it is not simply a good idea, but it is in fact what Christ would do, both as the server and the one who is sick. And so the point of service to the sick is that the whole community is bearing the burden of one for whom they are unable to participate regularly. And in an age in which medicines are so much more widely available than they were in the 5th century, we have to perhaps ask ourselves, we might be able to medicate on a pretty easy basis in comparison to those who live in the monastery of St. Benedict in the middle of the Egyptian desert, 1,500 years ago. But have we perhaps in some case lost the concern for the sick? Have we simply left it up to, just take some medication and stay homebound for a bit? And have we lost the ability to perhaps reconnect in the very important sense of human interaction? It's perhaps something that we need to think about, especially given that the care of the sick is a spiritual exercise and not just a physical one. Although human nature itself is inclined to be compassionate toward the elderly and the young, the authority of the rule should also provide for them. Since their lack of strength must always be taken into account, they should certainly not be required to follow the strictness of the rule with no regard to food, but should be treated with kindly consideration and allowed to eat before the regular hours. The spiritual life of the community of St. Benedict is also taken into consideration for the stages of life that one is in. The elderly and the young, referenced in the Rule of St. Benedict, really do mean those who are first beginning life and those who are coming to the end of it. Remember that children often in the lines of the Rule of St. Benedict over the ages were committed to monasteries sometimes. And the thing that we have to understand is that we have to be compassionate towards those in different life stages. For those who are elderly or young, it might not be spiritually helpful to fast. And this is something that Benedict actually names as a practical matter. Let them receive their food before the regular hours. There's some times where strength is simply not there for some who are young and some who are old. There are often times whenever we have to make exceptions to the general rule of the healthy so that we can bring those in different life stages into the life of the community. To perhaps sum this up a little bit, there is deep consideration that must be held in mind for the community of St. Benedict. It's not an option for anyone who observes the rule to simply assume that one size fits all for everyone. Benedict, over and over and over again throughout just the small bits of the rule that we've read so far, makes it abundantly clear that there has to be consideration and discernment taken in for every single member of the community. The rule is not meant to be oppressive and burdensome. A little strictness for the purposes of driving out sin and building virtue is what is necessary, but this rule is never meant to be tyrannical, never meant to be a source of both measurement against, in the sense of which measuring our worth against it. It's meant to be a tool that we use in growing in holiness. And every single person in the monastery, even the prioress and the abbot, all of them are different people. They're not the same person. And everyone requires different things at different stages of life. We require more care when we're young than when we are in our healthy 30s and 40s. We require more care and more attention when we are in our 70s, 80s, and 90s. This is a simple matter of practicality that is not without its spiritual import. It is a deeply spiritual thing to be attentive to those in every stage of life and to shelve our needs in service to those who need us most.